Here's what you need to know about workers' compensation in 2026. Insurance companies have made money on workers' compensation, which means your rates, if you haven't had claims, should be flat or down. So, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about what's going on in the workers' compensation insurance marketplace and what you can do to make sure you win in your renewal in 2026. Let's get into it. Like I said in the opening, insurance companies have made a lot of money on workers' compensation insurance. And if you look over time, the rates for workers' compensation have come down dramatically. I remember when plumbing insurance rates were about $5 for every $100 in payroll. Now it's 2 to 3. It means that if you haven't looked at your workers' compensation recently and it hasn't been chopped, you may be paying too much. Now, here's some context in the marketplace. There is an increase in medical costs in America. Everybody's feeling that. We feel it on the health insurance side. It's kind of factored into what's being charged on the workers' compensation insurance side. Further, there's an increase in mental health, and what about that is covered in a workers' compensation claim. This varies so much state by state. It's kind of expected that if you have some mental health issues as a result of a physical injury, that's covered as part of workers' compensation. However, there's questions about if you experience mental health agony as a result of being on the job, should that be covered as a workers' compensation claim? That varies state to state. So the implication there for you as a buyer is that if you have a type of work that puts an employee in a very intense situation from a mental health role, an example I experienced was uh, people that work on a 211 call center. So people that are contemplating suicide. Insurance companies look at that and say, yeah, there may not be a physical risk, but there's a mental risk. You just got to consider that. There's a lot of companies where that's not going to be an issue, but there are some where that could be a very serious issue. You also got to consider that auto injuries are the most likely cause of an on the job fatality. And it's also one of the places where you're most likely to have a catastrophic event in your business, which means if you are in a business that is very heavy on vehicle usage, that's going to impact your workers' compensation rates, which also means that you are going to need to be able to document your vehicle safety plan from a workers' compensation perspective. So some examples would be transportation organizations, trucking organizations, limousines, or even service providers for the intellectually and developmentally disabled with a large fleet of vehicles. If you're driving people around all the time, your workers' compensation company is going to want to know what you're doing on an auto safety side because they know one of the quickest ways they're going to have a large workers' comp claim is somebody getting hurt in an auto accident. You just got to understand these things because that's what the underwriter's thinking. You're going to have to be proactive about answering the questions in their brain to make sure that you get the best deal. So here's how you win in your 2026 renewal, knowing everything that's going on. One, so important. Make sure your broker understands and can explain to you the marketplace for your business and the companies that are trying to win your type of organization. If your broker does not know the companies that are interested in writing your insurance, you are not going to get competition for your workers' compensation policy. You're not going to have a good feel on what you should be paying. You're going to end up feeling like you're paying too much. You may or may not. It's really more a factor of you just don't understand who your options are. So make sure you've got the right broker. When you go to the market, if you go to the market, make sure you're giving all the information the underwriter needs up front. So that's going to mean payrolls by job description and where people live and what their job duties are. Keep in mind that workers' compensation is based off of the type of work that people do and then payroll. So there's a big difference between the plumber and the person that works in the office in a plumbing business. You're going to have to be able to break those down for the underwriter to make sure that you get the best deal. Be able to document your employee safety manual and also a return to work plan. So these two documents demonstrate one, you've got a plan to make sure that people are safe on the job. And two, if they do get hurt, you've got a plan on how to get them back to work as quickly as possible because there's a lot of studies that will tell you the longer that somebody's out of work, the less likely they are to come back and the more expensive that workers' compensation claim is going to be. So, what insurance companies want to see out of you as the owner of a company or the director of a company is that you have a plan on how to get people back to work to reduce it, to minimize lost wages and to get people back on the job. I already talked about auto safety, but it is critical. If we know that the most likely way you're going to have a fatality on the job is in an auto accident, you got to be able to demonstrate that you know how to keep people safe when they're driving vehicles. Also, risk transfer is critical. So this applies across a lot of industries. And let me explain to you what that means. If you are using 1099s in your workforce and they don't have their own workers' compensation insurance, your workers' compensation company is going to charge you for how much you pay them because they know if that 1099 gets hurt on your job site, they're paying the workers' compensation claim. The state doesn't want to have to pay for your injured workers. Therefore, they put the onus on you to prove that they aren't your worker. So this applies to the construction industry too. If you're going to subcontract out work, you need to make sure that you have a subcontractor agreement and you're making sure that those people have liability and workers' compensation insurance and they're adding you as an additional insured and waiving subrogation. You need to do that every time. It needs to be a part of how you run your business. You also need, as an organization, if you've had claims, to be able to explain what happened and how you're mitigating them in the future. Nothing is harder to explain to an underwriter than, yeah, I know that they've had three people fall off ladders in the last 3 years, but that was just a fluke. It's never a fluke. Nobody believes it a fluke. It's a fluke. It might have been just a fluke, but the thing is, everybody says it's a fluke. So we have to overcome the boy who cried wolf syndrome on it was just a fluke. You got to be able to acknowledge that something happened and there's a plan to prevent it again. And then, whenever possible, use technology to monitor behavior and make things safer. So, a good example on this is on the auto side. Make sure you're using telematics if it's available. Those are units that monitor how fast people are driving, how hard they're braking, how hard they're accelerating, how many left turns, where they're driving the vehicles. If you can monitor behavior to be proactive about identifying situations that result in claims and then reducing them, it'll keep your claims down. Operations with less claims pay less for insurance, that you have less claims you have to manage, and nobody likes claims. I think it's sidebar. I'm just not sure anybody's really happy with how claims are handled ever because they're a pain to deal with. So have less claims so you don't have to deal with it. But also, it just helps with negotiating your renewals. But all in, if you've been a good account, if you haven't had any claims, this is a good year to cash in. And especially when there are some lines of coverage that are going to be going up, like auto insurance and umbrella will be going up. If you have liability exposures that are considered to be high risk, those are going to be going up. Use your workers' compensation as a ballast to keep your overall bill down. If you want to talk to me about your renewal, contact information's in the descriptions. You can find it on the YouTube channel. If this is helpful, hit like and subscribe. It helps other people like you find the content. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please go build something.